Hello, scholars. My name is Dr. Karis Dillon, and the goal of this channel is to make academic subjects easier to understand. Now, yes, I am the same Dr. Karis Dillon that had over 100 DSM-5 videos on YouTube. And you never believe it, but I got hacked. Some woman took down every single one of my videos, confiscated my email, and essentially took me down. So I want to truly thank this woman because now I'm just going to build these videos back up better than before because my goal is to help my students. It's not to take apart or smash some other person's material so that students suffer in the process. My goal has always been to help and not hinder. And that's what makes me an effective and compassionate educator. Now, if you were to pick up a DSM-5 book, the very first category of disorders would be neurodevelopmental disorders. And these are disorders that come from or develop usually during early childhood, sometimes even before the child enters school. According to the DSM-5, with neurodevelopmental disorders, these mean deficits. Deficits are kind of a lagging behind in a child's academic, meaning their schoolwork, social, how they interact with other children, personal, their own psychological well being and reflection, or occupational functioning, how well they'll be able to go about doing things independently as comparing others their age? How do they compare with others their age? Now, I don't want to confuse you. I want you to know that neurodevelopmental disorder is the overall category that we're looking at. And when we talk about the disorders that are inside the neurodevelopmental category, we'll always be looking at the academic work, the social interaction, the occupational functioning, as well as the psychology, what's going on, how are they reflecting. So those little tiny characteristics are going to be brought forward in each of these neurodevelopmental disorders that we're going to introduce. So the very first grouping of neurodevelopmental disorders are what are called intellectual disabilities. And this means that the individual has problems, and these are usually children, with reasoning, analyzing, solving problems, thinking critically about different topics, academic learning, mental abilities, judgment, and any other cognitive capacity. Now, generally, when these capabilities are limited, it causes deficits within other factions. So let's say you have a child in school and they're trying to keep in par, learning the vocabulary or adding and subtracting. If they start falling behind, that's going to affect socially with other children. It'll also affect the child themselves psychologically or personally because they know that they're not doing what the other children are able to do. And it can also affect how well they can do for their age. Like in gym class, when we had, I don't know about you, but I was asked to hop, skip, gallop, and all that other stuff I didn't have a fun time with. But there's a real reason why a gym teacher is doing that. They want to see physiologically, is a child keeping up? Because those are often indicators that something might be wrong. A child with an intellectual disability can come from a variety of reasons. It can come from something going wrong in prenatal development, meaning when the baby or the fetus or the embryo was being developed within the mother, or when the child is born. Sometimes there are things that go on during the birth process where a child could lack oxygen and they don't get enough oxygen to the brain and it hurts the brain maturation and processing. Or it could really be a head injury that takes place early within age before they get to elementary school. Any of those circumstances could lead to an intellectual disability. Now that category of intellectual disability, which is a part of the neurodevelopmental disability, that has different disorders that are underneath it. So here are the intellectual disabilities that a person could have. They call the first one intellectual developmental disorder, global developmental delay, and unspecified intellectual disability. Now, I'm not going to go into those now because that would be confusing. What I'm going to do is have a video that talks about each one of those intellectual disabilities, and that will be in the next couple of videos. The next group under neurodevelopmental disorders is communication or social issues. These social issues are shown through deficits in learning or using language, as well as picking up on speech, as well as taking in verbal and nonverbal cues that come along with language. This communication deficit makes it difficult for a child to interact with other children. As you can see, those four characteristics at the beginning, they're going to play into the role. If a person comes along with a communication disorder, they're going to have trouble with their peers, just trying to initiate ideas or maybe just even initiate play. So all of these are going to affect all of those characteristics in some way, shape, or form. So the disorders that are part of the communication disorders are language disorder, speech sound disorder, childhood onset fluency disorder such as stuttering, social pragmatic communication disorder, and unspecified communication disorder. Now these are all, again, these are all disorders. They're all neurodevelopmental disorders, but they're under the category of communication disorder. So in this light, I would say, okay, I've got a neurodevelopmental disorder. It is under the category of communication, and it is this. And then I would label or name that. So that is two different categories of neurodevelopmental disorders. The third that we see is autism spectrum disorder. Now, I still think we're learning tons about autism spectrum disorder, but it has a category of its own because it has such unique qualities to it. I have three individuals within my own family, my husband, my daughter, and my son, that all have autism, and man, are they night and day. And I'll talk more about them in the video about autism. But there's huge, huge differences between how they develop language, how they deal with touch, how they handle social communication. I had one son who had help at the beginning of his life, and I have a daughter that did not get that help. My husband did not get the help. So we'll talk about early intervention and how that played a role. Another category that is included within the neurodevelopmental disorder is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And this sits as a category of its own. Now, we can go into a lot of the signs and symptoms of it, but we're not going to at this point. I want to just include the other disorders that go inside of that category. You must feel like we're getting category after category, but if you remember that these are just all neurodevelopmental disorders, I would say we're afraid with our children, and we don't have everything mapped out, and children don't all communicate the same way. And because of that, it makes even professionals struggle to kind of fit what's this? Why is this happening? So this is just professionals that are still trying to figure all of this out and give it a name or a label for possible help in the future. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder includes the category of other specified attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and then unspecified attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And of course, I promise you, we will go into what those are later in the videos. All right, so one of the last categories of neurodevelopmental disorders is motor disorder. Motor, think about movement, motor movement. The individual disorders involved in the category include developmental coordination disorder, stereotypic movement disorder, tic disorders, other specified tic disorder, unspecified tic disorder, and then other specified neurodevelopmental disorders. I can guarantee you when a new edition of the DSM comes down the line in about 10 years, we're going to see a lot of differences and changes as it comes to neurodevelopmental disorders. We might see, autism taken out of one part and something put in the next. The goal, though, is not to be perfect when it comes to giving the signs and symptoms of each disorder. It's to help children or adults or teenagers that have mental illness to really help to define what might be going on and then steering them to a professional that understands that circumstance the best.